There are things that people say on television that they have never said anywhere else. Not because television makes people brave. It often does the opposite, producing the managed, camera-conscious. This is my television face version of a person rather than the actual one. But occasionally, in the specific, unscheduled, the room asked the right question way. Something arrives that has been living in a person, and that the question unlocks, and that arrives in the room before the person has fully decided to let it arrive. These are the best moments on live television. Not because they are dramatic, they are often the quietest moments, but because they are true in the specific, complete. I have never said this before, but I am saying it now. Way that truth arrived when the room was large enough, and the question was direct enough, and the person had spent long enough carrying the thing that the carrying had cost them the management. This is a story about one of those moments. About a woman named Vivienne who was standing at a Family Feud podium when Steve Harvey asked her a question that she answered honestly, completely, plainly, without the softening or the management or the version that the room might have preferred. And about what the honest answer was, and about what Steve Harvey did when he heard it, which was drop his cards, which he had been holding for 14 years of doing this show and which had never left his hands before, and about what he said after he dropped them. Which was not what Vivienne expected, and was not what the room expected, and was exactly what the afternoon needed. And about what Vivienne said in return, which was the last word on the subject, and which was better than what Steve Harvey said, which was saying something because what Steve Harvey said was very good. Hit that like button and subscribe right now before we go any further, because this channel is here for exactly these stories, for the honest answers that arrive before the management catches them, and we come back with one every single week. Now let us talk about Vivienne. Vivienne Okafor was 52 years old and had been born in Port Harcourt, Nigeria, and had come to the United States at 24 and had lived in Houston, Texas for 28 years, and had been in those 28 years most of the things that the 28 years had made available to her, which was a great many things. She had been a graduate student, a research assistant, a marketing manager, a business owner, a wife, a mother, a widow, and then at 46, a wife again. The second marriage was the one that was going to be relevant to the afternoon and to the thing Vivienne said, and the thing she said required the understanding of what the second marriage was, and of how it had come to be, and of who Vivienne was at 46 when it came to be, which was a woman who had been widowed at 43 when her first husband, Emeka, died of pancreatic cancer after a 14-month illness, who had spent the 14 months of the illness and the 3 years after it in the specific. Exhausting, one day at a time quality of a woman who was managing grief and 2 children, and a business that had been built partly on Emeka's professional connections, and that required, without Emeka, the specific, organized, forward-moving attention of a woman who had no choice but to be organized and forward-moving because the children were still children, and the business was still the business, and the mortgage was still the mortgage. She had been all of these things. She had been them with the specific, grounded, I know what is required, and I will do it quality that was her quality in every season. She had not been fine exactly, but she had been functional, which was the available thing, and which she had done at the highest possible standard. At 46, 3 years after Emeka's death, she had met Robert Okafor at an industry conference in Dallas. He was 58, a successful import-export businessman who had been widowed himself 2 years before. He was warm and attentive and competent and kind in the specific, measured, nothing excessive way that some older men were kind. Not effusively, not dramatically, but consistently in the day-to-day, I will be here way that consistency was kind. He was also, and this was the part that Vivienne had been honest about privately, and had never been honest about publicly, financially secure in the specific, meaningful. This changes the calculation way that financial security changed calculations when you had been carrying a mortgage and a business and 2 children for 3 years on your own, and when the carrying had been, whatever else it was, very heavy. She had married him 2 years after they met. She had loved him in the specific, warm, built over time way that love was built when you met someone at 46, and when the love was not the first love but the second, more considered, this is what I am choosing kind. She had married him for both, for the love and for the security. She had told herself the love part loudly and the security part quietly in the private place where she kept the true account. She had been keeping the true account for 6 years. Robert Okafor was 64 and was at the podium, warm and attentive in the same way he was in every room, and the afternoon was going to require him to hear something that he had perhaps suspected, and had perhaps not fully faced, and that his wife was going to say in a room full of people before she had decided to say it. He was going to receive it with a grace that said something important about who he was. Their daughter from Vivienne's first marriage, Nadia, 22, was a senior in college. Emeka's warmth and Vivienne's directness, and a particular forward-moving quality that was entirely her own. She had adored her father, and she had loved Robert in the specific, complicated, "He is not my father" way of a young woman who had lost her father at 16 and who had found in Robert a person she could receive without pretending he was the same as the person she had lost. She was here because she was her mother's person, and because she was going to be useful on a game show in the same direct, warm, thoroughly her mother's daughter way she was useful everywhere. Vivienne's sister Amara, 48, was a physician in Houston who had watched the 28 years from the closest possible proximity, and who had been beside Vivienne through both marriages and through the carrying, and through the 3 years between, and who had the specific 28-year-long view. I know the full account quality of someone who had been there for the full account, and who was the one person in Vivienne's life to whom she had said, quietly in the year before the second marriage, the thing she had not said to anyone else. And Vivienne's longtime friend and former co-worker Blessing, 50, who had known Vivienne for 20 years and who had the warm, direct, "I have been in the room" quality of someone who had been beside a person through multiple chapters and who had the comprehensive picture. The application had been submitted by Amara, who had submitted it because Vivienne was, in Amara's assessment, one of the most interesting and most honest people she knew, and because she believed that the combination of those qualities in a room with Steve Harvey and a direct question was going to produce something worth watching. She had not been wrong. The pregame. Steve Harvey arrived at Vivienne with the genuine, curious attention he brought to people who were going to have something real to say, asked about the marketing business, received the direct, organized description of 25 years of building something. He asked about the second marriage. He had been told there had been a first husband, had been told Emeka had died, had treated the information with the respect it deserved, and was now asking about what came after. He said, "How did you meet Robert?" She described the Dallas conference with the warm, direct, organized quality she described everything. He said, "What did you think when you met him?" She said, "I thought he was a good man." He said, "Just that," she said, "and I thought he was financially stable." She said it in the plain, direct, this is simply accurate voice without softening because she was Vivienne and she described things accurately. Steve Harvey looked at her. He said, "Both of those things." She said, "Both of those things, yes." He said, "And you married him?" She said, "Yes." He said in the gentle, following voice, "When you married him, what was more important?" She looked at him. She received the question. She was in it for a moment that was the right length. She said, "Honestly," he said, "Yes," she said. "At 46, with 2 children and a mortgage and a business and 3 years of carrying it alone, honestly, the stability was the more important thing." She said it in the plain, direct, I'm going to say the true thing voice. She said, "I love him. I have loved him for 6 years, and I love him more now than I did when we married. But when I married him, the stability was the more important thing." She said, "That is the honest answer." Steve Harvey dropped his cards. Not dramatically, they simply were in his hands and then they were not, and the knot was visible and was the specific, involuntary. The hands have released what they were holding quality of someone whose hands had received something and whose hands had responded before the person had decided to respond. He looked at the cards on the floor. He looked at Vivienne. He looked at the cards again. He said, "I have been doing this show for 14 years. He said it in the plain, slightly undone, this is what is happening voice. "I have never dropped my cards." He said, "You just made me drop my cards." The room produced the sound of a room that had been holding its breath and that had just been given permission to exhale and that was exhaling with the full, warm, slightly laughing quality of a room that had watched something genuine happen and that was glad it had been there. Not the shock laugh. The received something laugh. The "this is why we are here" laugh. Steve Harvey picked up his cards. He was in the warm, slightly recovered, but still in quality of a man who had been hit by something and who had picked up his cards, but who was still in the hitting. He looked at Vivienne. He said, "I need you to say that again because I want to make sure the room heard it." He said it in the organizing, the room needs this voice. Vivienne said, "I married him because he is a good man and because I needed the stability." She said it in the same plain, direct, unadorned voice. She did not add to it. She did not apologize for it. She did not frame it in a more flattering light because the light it was in was the accurate light and she was not interested in inaccurate lights. She said, "After 3 years of carrying everything alone, the stability was the more important thing at the moment of the decision." She paused. She said, "And I would make the same decision again. Because 6 years in, the love is real and the stability allowed me to get here." She said it as the completion of the account. The not just the first part but the whole thing, the what came after as part of the honest answer. She said, I have no regrets about the decision. I have regrets about having been afraid to say it out loud, she said, until now. Steve Harvey was looking at her with the full, specific, I have been doing this for 30 years and I have never expression of a man who had been given something in a form he had not expected and who was in the receiving of it. He said, you said, I have regrets about having been afraid to say it out loud. He said, why were you afraid to say it? Vivienne said, because we are not supposed to. She said it in the plain, factual, this is simply accurate voice. We are not supposed to factor the practical into the decision about who we marry. The story is supposed to be only about the love. She said, but I was 46 years old and I had been widowed and I had 2 children and I had been carrying everything for 3 years and the practical was real and it was a real factor and pretending it was not a factor would have been dishonest. She said, I am not willing to be dishonest about my own life to make the story of my life more presentable. She said it with the warm, direct, this is simply who I am quality. She said, I am 52 years old. I have been honest about everything else. I can be honest about this. The room was very still. Steve Harvey was very still. He was in the receiving of everything she had said, in the specific, full, arrived somewhere quality of someone who had been given more than they expected and who was sitting with all of it. He said in the quiet, following voice, you said, I'm not willing to be dishonest about my own life to make the story of my life more presentable. He said, that might be the most complete sentence about honesty that anyone has said on this stage. He said it in the quiet, flat, this is simply true voice of someone making an accurate assessment. He said, and I want to say something about what you actually did, not the story of what you did, what you actually did. He said it in the organizing, this is important voice. You were 46 years old. You had been through 14 months of watching someone you loved die. You had been through 3 years of carrying everything that the death left behind. You made a decision with the full account in front of you, the love and the practical and the children and the mortgage and the 3 years of carrying, and you made the decision with everything in the account. He said, that is not a small thing. That is the decision of a person who is being honest with themselves about what they have and what they need. He said, and then you built the love. For 6 years you built it. You just told me the love is more real now than it was when you married him. He said, you knew what you were building when you started. He looked at Robert. Robert had been standing beside Vivienne through all of this with the specific, still, receiving quality of a man who had perhaps understood some version of this, and who had not heard it said directly before, and who was in the process of receiving the direct saying. His expression was not simple. It was the specific, complicated, something has just been named expression of a person receiving an honest account of something that concerned them, and that was both harder and more complete than the comfortable version of the account. He was in it. He was not managing it. He was receiving it with the grace that characterized him, which was the grace of a person who had earned someone's love over 6 years and who understood that the love was real and who could receive the honest account of how the love had been arrived at without the honest account diminishing the love. He said, I knew, he said it quietly. Not everything she just said, but I knew there was more to it than the love. He said, I was 58 years old. I had been widowed. I understood that a woman who had been carrying everything alone for 3 years was not going to make a decision based only on the love. He said, I understood what she needed and I wanted to be the person who could provide it. He said, I did not know she was carrying the not saying of it. He said it in the quiet, honest, this is what I did not know voice. He looked at Vivienne. He said, you did not need to carry that. He said it in the specific, direct, I am saying this clearly voice. You never needed to carry that. He said, I would have told you that if you had said it. Vivienne looked at her husband. She received this with the full, complete, not managing it quality of a woman who had just been told that the 6 years of carrying the not saying had been unnecessary, and who was in the specific, complicated, I did not know quality of someone who had been carrying something they could have put down and who had not known they could put it down until this room. She said, I know. She said it in the warm, settled, I believe you voice. I know you would have, she said. I was afraid of the judgment, not from you, she looked at the room, she said, from whoever was listening. She looked at Steve Harvey. From the story being the wrong kind of story, she said. A woman who married for money is supposed to be a specific kind of story, and I was not that story, but I was afraid of being received as that story. She said, so I did not say it. She paused. Said, I should have said it sooner. She said it in the plain, I am completing the account voice. The not saying was mine and it cost me something. I am saying it now. Steve Harvey looked at the room. He said, I want to say something about the kind of story. He said it in the direct, organizing voice. She said, a woman who married for money is supposed to be a specific kind of story. She said she was afraid of being received as that story. He said, I want to say what the actual story is. He said it in the plain, this is what I see voice. A woman who had been widowed, who had spent 3 years carrying everything, who made an honest decision with the full account in front of her, the love and the practical, and who then built the love for 6 years until it was more real than it was when she started, and who has been carrying the not saying for 6 years because she was afraid the story would be misread. He said, that is not the story of a woman who married for money. He said, that is the story of a woman who was honest with herself about what she needed and who chose someone who could provide it and who built something real with him over 6 years. He said, those are not the same story, not even close. He said, and the proof is that he knew, and the proof is that she would make the same decision again, and the proof is that the love is more real now than when it started. He said, that is not the wrong kind of story. He said, that is an extremely honest love story. It just required the whole account. Amara, at the end of the podium, had the specific, I told you this was the right room expression of a physician who had submitted an application, because she believed her sister deserved an afternoon where the room received the whole account, and who was watching the room receive the whole account, and who was receiving the receiving with the full weight of 28 years of being beside this woman. Nadia, beside her mother, had the 22-year-old's full, taking it an expression of a daughter who had been watching her mother for 22 years, and who was watching her mother say, in a room full of people, the thing she had been carrying privately, and who was receiving the saying with the warm, this is my mother quality of someone who knew the person and who was not surprised by the honest account, and who was glad the room had it. Blessing had the 20-year friend's warm, I knew the version she told me, and now the room knows the version she kept expression of someone whose picture of her friend had just been completed. Steve Harvey said, let's play some Family Feud. He said it in the warm, forward-moving, the game is what we do now voice. He said it with the specific, slightly bright-eyed, I am glad I am in this room quality of a man who had been given something and who was carrying it forward with him into the game. The game was excellent. Both families played well. Vivienne was extraordinary, not in the way of the pre-revelation Vivienne, who had been playing with one eye on the management, but in the way of the post-revelation Vivienne, who had put the management down and whose full attention was therefore available. Her marketing intelligence, 25 years of understanding what people responded to and why, and what they were actually saying when they said what they said, applied to survey questions with the warm, direct, entirely accurate quality of someone who had been reading people for a quarter-century, and who was reading these questions with all of it. She was right at the rate that put the game beyond reach for the opposing family by the 4th round. Robert was excellent in the specific, steady. This is how I am way of a man who had just heard something in a room full of people, and who was carrying the hearing with him into the game, and who was playing with the quiet, attentive. I am paying attention quality of someone whose quality of attention had changed in the last 30 minutes. He was right at a high rate, and he was warm, and he was, in the small ways that you could see if you were watching carefully, paying the kind of attention to Vivienne that the afternoon had reminded him to pay. Nadia was warm and fast. Amara was precise with the physician's accurate ground-level intelligence. Blessing was direct and right. The Akafer family won the main game. Vivienne walked to the fast money podium without discussion. She walked to it with the upright, forward-facing 28-year walk, the Port Harcourt walk and the Houston walk and the 14 months and the 3 years and the decision at 46 and the 6 years and the not saying put down in a room full of people and the putting down being the freeing of the hands that had been carrying it. Steve Harvey looked at her from across the stage. He said, I dropped my cards because of you. He said it in the warm, direct, this is the account voice. And then you said I would make the same decision again. And then you said the love is more real now than when we started. He said, and then you said I am not willing to be dishonest about my own life to make the story more presentable. He said, that is 3 of the best sentences anyone has said on this stage. He looked at her. Let's see what 25 years of understanding what people actually respond to looks like in 20 seconds. Vivienne said, start. He hit the button. Vivienne Akafer answered 5 Family Feud survey questions in 20 seconds with the warm, direct, entirely accurate intelligence of a marketing professional who had spent 25 years understanding what people actually said rather than what they were supposed to say, who had been inside the gap between the presented story and the honest one for 25 years professionally, and who had been inside it personally, and who had in the last 30 minutes said the honest version in a room large enough to hold it, and who was now answering the survey with the same honesty she had been giving everything since the moment she said the thing she had been carrying. She was right. 4 answers were number 1. Her 5th answer arrived at 16 seconds in Vivienne's voice, the warm, direct, the honest answer voice, and was number 1. Nadia scored 91 points in the second seat with the warm, 22-year-old's direct, "This is what I think" accuracy of a daughter who had learned honesty from her mother. Combined total, 291 points, $20,000. Steve Harvey brought the check. He held it and he said, "You dropped the cards first." He said it with the warm, direct, "This is the accurate description" voice. "I just picked them up." He held the check out. $20,000 for the whole account. Not the presentable version, the whole one. He said, "You said I'm 52 years old and I have been honest about everything else and I can be honest about this." He said, "That is the sentence." He said it in the quiet, final, "This is what I am going to carry from today" voice. "That is the sentence I am keeping from today." He gave her the check. He said, "What are you going to do with it?" Vivienne looked at the check. She said, "Robert and I are going to take a trip." She said it in the warm, organized, "This is what we are going to do" voice. "We have been talking about going back to Nigeria, to Port Harcourt, where I was born. He has never seen where I was born." She said, "I have been saying we will go, 6 years of saying we will go." She looked at Robert. She said, "We are going." She said, "This is going." Robert said, "Yes." He said it in the simple, confirmed, "This is what happens now" voice. "We are going." He said it with the warm, steady, "I said I would be here" quality he brought to everything, and that was, as it had always been, present and real. Steve Harvey looked at them. He said, "Port Harcourt." He said it in the warm, imagining it voice. "You are going to take him where you came from." He said, "He's going to see where you started." He said, "That is the right use of $20,000. He said it with the warm, entire, genuine quality of a man who meant it completely. "And when you get there, show him the sky." He said, "Show him where you started and let him see it." Vivienne received this with the warm, direct, "I will" expression. She said, "Yes." She said it simply. "I will show him where I started." She paused. She looked at Steve Harvey with the direct, slightly wry, "I am going to say the true thing" expression that was her expression for everything now in this room with the management down. She said, "It will help him understand why the stability mattered." She said it with the warm, specific, "This is accurate" quality of someone completing the picture. "When he sees where I started, he will understand why the security was the thing," she said, "and I will be glad for him to understand it." She said it in the plain, settled, "The account is now complete" voice. "I am glad for the room to understand it." She looked at the room. "I hope the room understands it." She said, "I was 46 and I had been carrying everything for 3 years and a good man offered me solid ground and I said yes." She said, "That is the story, the whole story." She said, "I am not ashamed of it." She said it in the final, "This is the last word" on the subject voice. "I am 46-year-old Vivienne is not ashamed of it, and 52-year-old Vivienne is not ashamed of it either." The room gave her everything it had. The episode aired 6 weeks later. The clip spread in the immediate, wide, deeply personal way of things that named a thing that a very large number of people had been carrying privately. Not the thing of marrying for money, the thing of having a practical consideration in a decision that was supposed to be only about the romantic, and of having carried the practical consideration privately because the story was supposed to be a different kind of story. Many people shared it with the specific, finally language quality of people watching their private experience be described correctly in public. Several wrote about decisions they had made, not just about marriage, but about career and location and friendship, and all the other decisions that were supposed to be made on the romantic terms, and that contained, honestly, the practical, and about the weight of carrying the practical privately because the story was supposed to be different. Several said, "I have been carrying this for years. I have now told the person I was carrying it from." Several said, "The receiving went better than I expected." Several said, "Thank you for the room." The specific sentence, "I am not willing to be dishonest about my own life to make the story of my life more presentable," traveled in the specific. This is the sentence way that sentences traveled when they were exactly right. Several people said they had saved it and were going to keep it where they kept things they were going to need. Several said they had shared it with a therapist. One therapist wrote, "My client brought this sentence to our session. We spent 45 minutes on it. It named something we had been circling for 2 years. I am grateful for the naming." Robert and Vivienne went to Port Harcourt. She showed him where she started. He saw the neighborhood and the schools and the places that had been the context before the context changed. She told him, walking through the neighborhood, the full version of the years that had been the inside of the 28 years. The Port Harcourt years, and the Houston years, and the Emeka years, and the 3 years between, and the decision at 46, and the 6 years since. She told it to him the way she had told it to Steve Harvey, which was in the whole account, nothing managed, the practical and the love and the carrying and the building and all of it together. He listened. He had always listened. He said, now I understand. She said, I know, I needed you to understand. He said, I always understood that you needed more than just me. He said, I just did not know how to say it without it sounding like I did not think I was enough. She said, you were exactly enough. She said, you were the solid ground, he said, and you built on it. She said, and I built on it. He said, for 6 years, she said, and counting. He said, yes, and counting. She said it one more time in Port Harcourt. With the solid ground beside her and the 20 years before him visible and the 6 years after him real, she said, I am not ashamed of it. She said it in the same voice as always, the whole account, nothing managed, the story she had been afraid to tell. The story that turned out to be a love story after all. Just one that required the whole account to be visible. One that was better than the presentable version. One that was hers. If this story reached you, if you have been carrying a practical consideration in a romantic story and have been afraid of the wrong kind of story, share this today. Leave a comment below and tell us what you are carrying from this story, because this community carries things together and your voice here matters. And subscribe right now if you are not already with us, because every single week we come back with stories exactly like this one. Stories about the whole account and not the presentable version. Stories about the solid ground and the building on it. And stories about the woman who said, I am 52 years old and I have been honest about everything else and I can be honest about this. And who said, I'm not ashamed of it, and who meant it, and the room believes her. We will see you in the next one.